G'day, yoga lovers. It's Mike. Welcome to this Sunday session. This is going to be a long one, guys. You're just going to have to bear with me because there's so much I want to talk about. Um, Sovereign critical thinking and how the price is way too high if you don't choose to think critically and sovereign in a sovereign way. Um, so, I feel like I'm an insider into what it's like to feel oppressed and then go beyond oppression, and how I got caught up in ideas about who I was for the benefit of others, that wasn't true, and how I carried those false ideas subconsciously, really, without even thinking about it until much later in life. I'll give you a bit of a breakdown, and I'll be really brief about it, but most of you know that I'm gay. And like a lot of gay men in the 80s and 90s, it certainly wasn't cool when you're 14 years old to be perceived of being gay. I wasn't out as a gay person, I was in kind of denial. But to give you an idea of how I sort of know this particular sort of oppression, when I was 14, and it's hard for most boys at this age. It really is. So no one gets out alive. I don't have the monopoly on suffering. Gay people, no one has the monopoly on suffering. But was something unique to me in that, and to gay men in general, was that it was incredibly uncool in the 80s, 90s to be gay or perceived to be gay. And so my options on the weekends were, after a week of relentless daily abuse, and teasing at school, was to, by 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock latest, I would have to go into lockdown in my home or have been out of my town by maybe 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, on a bus into the city where I could hang out with my friends. It was not an option at all for me to be out at night in the northern beaches where I was, because I would absolutely get gay bashed. And I remember in year nine, there was one day at school where I felt that there was something wrong. And when I realised, it was the first day, I think, in maybe 2 years, 3 years, that I hadn't been abused or teased by someone, that the floodgates opened. I just was granted this tiny reprieve, and I was about to bawl my eyes out, and everyone looked like they were going to tease me. But my primal collapsing on the grass in year nine was so full on that it really threw a lot of people, and then people backed off only for a few days, and then it was back on again. Now this peaked in year 11, where I was approached very quietly by a really beautiful girl who had overheard a gang of boys from three different high schools were planning to gay bash me at a debutante ball. And I didn't tell anyone. In fact, my debutante date still doesn't know, some 30 years later. And I remember being terrified for my life because I didn't know when and where it was going to happen. And I do remember a moment, one of the ringleaders, I saw it at one of the urinal stalls while I was washing my hands, and he was on his own, and I could have easily messed him up. I was a lot bigger than him. He was obviously in a vulnerable state, and I had to use every cell in my body, not to cause serious harm to him. And I saw his humanity. I saw him on his own as a pathetic, weak guy that was pretty weak without all his mates around him. And I remember him looking at the tiles or something, and I thought, God, you're just a kid. So anyway, I managed to maneuver the situation so I was never on my own, and that I was back in my hotel room, and so that never eventuated. Now, what was interesting was, I noticed that the Mardi Gras parades were almost exclusively gay people that would walk in the parades, and their supporters, including their straight friends, would very politely stand on the sides and cheer them on. Now, in the 90s, four of us a year were being murdered, including a friend of mine, Stephen Dempsey. He was an acquaintance. I had a major crush on him. And in 94, he was brutally murdered in my hometown, Narrabeen, actually. And I found out way after the fact. I actually turned up at the Oxford where he was there every Friday night having a beer. And he was this tall, majestic, Kiwi, beautiful man. And what I was greeted with was a small memorial, his photo, and a bunch of flowers, and that's how I found out that he had been brutally murdered. So in the 90s, yeah, it would be gay people in the centre walking up the street and their supporters on the side. And then over the years, what had happened was in 97, the last gay law was abolished, which meant presumably that the consensus that we had every 4 years, there was an explosion of gay men, and all of a sudden, people in politics were really, really interested in us, and what they were really interested in was our vote. So Mardi Gras grew to this mammoth thing it is today, and instead of just gay people walking the parade as I think it should be, it's about half half. It's about half gay people, half heterosexual people, and I'm sure those people want to support us, and it's fine. It didn't go unnoticed that I was snarled at as I tried to edge my way to the front by mostly heterosexual people, so I could see my gay brothers walk up the street. That didn't go unnoticed, and we went from being a genuine concern for people to like a lapdog. We were entertainment for people. Our gay bars got taken over by hens nights and bachelorette nights, and it was us gay people out on the street trying to get a glimpse of the drag queens on stage because all the heterosexual people were in our bars and clubs. So there was so many instances where these compassionate, well-meaning people, and I'm sure they are, really didn't understand what we had gone through and didn't seem to have any respect for what we'd gone through and who we really are. We were really like playthings, like toys, and I didn't like it. Now, of course, when I moved to Port Douglas, that changed. I thought Port Douglas needed a gay safe house, but then I realised the whole town of Port Douglas is a gay safe house. So a lot of that kind of stuff dribbled away, and people see you for who you are, not your sexuality, not your gender, not your skin colour. And I realised as I lived here for a while that I was really brainwashed into thinking that we were still oppressed as a section of society. We're only 5-10% of the society, and then we managed to get convinced that there was systemic homophobia inside the government, and that unless the government gave us these preventative HIV medications for free or subsidised through the pharmaceutical scheme, that they secretly wanted us to die, and that was a bullshit. Now 25% of gay men, and I'll do this in another video, you probably won't know this, are on these drugs called PrEP that have the same side effects as chemotherapy. So these drugs are actually being given to gay men who don't have HIV. This is like a preventative. So it's the equivalent of a doctor giving a patient that smokes chemotherapy, instead of saying just quit smoking, i.e. to the gay man, just go back to wearing condoms. They were great in the 80s and 90s. They brought the infection rate right down. We allowed ourselves to be convinced that that would be really good for us. Again, by governments and really a noisy political elite. So now we've got this new crisis that's looming in the next 5-10 years, where you're going to get kidney failure, liver damage, bone density loss, psychological issues because of the toxicity. So all of that we have to look forward to as gay men, because we allowed ourselves to be convinced that we're being re-oppressed, that there's systemic homophobia, and it is absolutely bullshit. I've spent a little bit of time with, people very high in government, world leaders and stuff like that, and they just don't think like that. So I'm watching our community get punked into being convinced that we're still oppressed. I know oppression. Okay, I've been through it. We are not oppressed. There is still some areas that need help, of course, but for the most part, most gay men can go about their life without fear of being hurt or injured or being prejudiced against. So when Black Lives Matter came along, I noticed a lot of you, very well intentioned, put the black square up and Black Lives Matter stuff on your Instagram. And I know you're doing that because you care. But I and a lot of other gay men quietly could recognize straight away how this was a political situation, not a humanitarian situation. And we could recognize all the clues. We could see that people, just like in our Mardi Gras parades, went from really cheering us on because we needed it to just basically patronizing us and condescending to us and speaking for us. And I saw this at a Black Lives Matter protest in Brisbane that I had to cut through to get to my train station to get to the airport. And I noticed it would have been 80% white kids, all well intentioned, that, you know, had their Black Lives Matter signs screaming over the Indigenous. What I would have liked to have seen is all those white kids to be on the sidelines of the streets so that the Indigenous and those under the Black Lives Matter could walk so that they could be seen clearly and heard completely. But that didn't happen. And to make it worse, at Central Station, I noticed all the white kids with their Black Lives Matter signs posting all their photos on Instagram, while the Indigenous, older Aboriginal women were left to stand. So you'd think that on that one day that you could have at least given your seat up for an Indigenous person. No, I was here first, you can stand. And it really pissed me off. So what's interesting is that I did mention this on my Facebook, and I lost a few friends. Friends, mostly from cities, unfriended me. But what really hurt was that one girl in Port Douglas who I was friendly with, who was the wife of a councillor here, not only unfriended me, but also deliberately walked away from me as I approached her. We've been very friendly for years. And I thought, well, how patronising and how condescending to kind of do something like that just because as a gay man I don't think the way you think I should think. It was really kind of creepy. So it's hit Port Douglas. This whole thing is really scary. In America, I'm half American. My dad's American. I'm watching this go really crazy, where people are being bullied. A guy that I follow, Mark, who's a gay guy, just got gay bashed by people wearing Black Lives Matter t-shirts. Black Lives Matter is a corporation, by the way. Again, I'm sure most people that put up those black squares were probably supportive of that. No one likes the idea of anyone being treated differently because of the colour of their skin or their sexuality. Hello, I understand that. But I'm realising that this way of thinking is really frightening. So in the last couple of years, I've been unpacking and thinking for myself, and this is the whole point of this video, is that a lot of these people kind of go along with what they see on the news because it feels safe and they want to do good, but sometimes you might be supporting an ideology and not even realizing it. So what has actually been really interesting is that since I've been doing yoga, and I teach a lot of yoga, I do a lot of yoga, I've really plucked up the courage to speak up for myself and tell people or share with people who want to hear what I feel about things. And I should be able to do that without being blocked and unfriended and judged, because I'm not, I don't care if you like Donald Trump or not. I kind of like him actually, only because he's positioned Senator Grenfell. He's really hot, by the way. That's not why I like him, but it kind of helps. But Senator Grenfell is now in charge of a task force to decriminalise homosexuality worldwide. And I think that's a great idea. That's such a Trump thing to do. But of course, when you listen to the news and the media and the passive messaging that this guy is resident evil, and I actually just don't believe that. And that's what sovereign thinking is about, is that I want you guys to be able to disagree with me, and I want you to know that I will never judge you for that. I'm fine if you disagree with me. You don't have to like the same things I do, and I'll always be there for you. And I think that's a really big lesson for all of us. We all need to be really kind to each other and allow different point of views. This is going to be a big challenge for all minorities. I don't know what it's like to be a black person or an Aboriginal person. I don't know what it's like to be a woman, but I do know what it's like to be a gay man, and I'm sick of being told that I'm oppressed. I'm not oppressed. Life is tough for everyone. Just because I'm gay, I don't need to vote or think a certain way. This is what sovereign thinking looks like. I think we've lost good faith as well, and what yoga has helped me with is to deal with people, not just deal with people, but accept and welcome people in that think differently from me. Yoga has seemed to cultivate good faith that just because a person voted against gay marriage, for example, it doesn't mean that they're a homophobe. It doesn't. They just might have a really funny idea or a religious belief that contradicts gay marriage. That it doesn't mean that they hate me or they think gay people are bad, you know. And I know that must be, for some of you, so hard to get your brain around. But the liberation, the lightness, the playfulness that yoga has given me, and sovereign thinking and the liberation that's given me, has pulled me out of the depression and the anxiety that I used to feel. So the only way to get there is to get on the mat. If you get on the mat, you fortify yourself. If you get on the mat, you strengthen yourself so that you can actually stand up for what you believe in and not be threatened by people that disagree. That's my point. Ta-da! So, I hope that's helpful. Leave your comments. I feel like I've got a lot off my chest. I love you guys. I really do. And tear me apart in the comments.